The secret is not to force sympathy with the crowd, but to learn how to be found by minds as rare and deep as yours. Have you ever stopped to think why? The more your mind matures, the smaller your circle of friends becomes. Often, society looks at those who prefer to keep to themselves, enjoying their own company, and immediately gives them a heavy label. Antisocial, problematic, or even arrogant. But the truth that few people understand is quite different from that. If you are the type who notices subtle signs of falseness from afar, who runs away from shallow conversations, and feels that most social interactions just drain your peace, know that the problem is definitely not with you. Here in the United States, where the culture of forced networking and appearances is pushed down your throat from high school to the corporate environment, choosing your own space and not caring about pleasing everyone seems almost like a crime. Analytical and deep minds simply operate on another frequency. You don't need constant approval or a superficial group to fill an inner void, because you are already complete by yourselves. However, the great frustration is not the lack of people in the world, but the lack of people at your level. People with whom you can talk about ideas, purposes, and real life, without needing to wear social masks. That is why today I am going to show you that this distancing of yours, in fact, powerful filter. And more than that, I will give you a practical method to find and connect with those who operate exactly on the same frequency as you. But before we talk about how to find these brilliant minds out there, we need to understand exactly what happens inside your brain that makes common friendships so exhausting. Imagine your brain is like the processor of a very high-performance computer. It was made to run complex programs, analyze deep scenarios, and process an absurd amount of data all the time. Now imagine taking this extremely powerful machine and forcing it to run a basic, repetitive little game all day long. That's exactly what happens when a person with high cognitive ability is forced to spend hours in conversation circles about other people's lives, neighborhood gossip, or that famous office water cooler chat. It's not that you are arrogant or think you're superior, it's that your mind simply short-circuits. The social cost of overthinking is extremely high. Intelligent people have a natural, almost involuntary radar for reading between the lines of human interactions. As many notice and feel firsthand, people with this trait pick up very subtle signals most ignore. Falseness hidden in a smile, manipulation disguised as good advice, or that invisible, exhausting competition happening behind the scenes. While most people let these things pass, your processor is capturing, analyzing, and translating every detail. And the result of that, the system overheats. That's why, after a social event, whether a typical weekend barbecue or a mandatory Friday corporate happy hour, you come home feeling exhaustion that can be physical. Your brain spent a huge amount of energy just trying to tolerate and survive a shallow environment. Neuroscience explains that more analytical minds have biological need for silence and solitude to organize ideas. Your focus is on bigger purposes: staying healthy, building financial independence, taking care of your home, and growing. You literally don't have time or energy to invest in empty drama or relationships with hypocritical people. This selectiveness isn't coldness. It's a neurological and emotional defense mechanism to protect your most valuable asset, your energy. But the problem arises when, under external pressure, we try to ignore our self-preservation instinct and do everything to fit into the wrong environment, falling into a very silent and dangerous trap. And then we enter a territory that you probably already know very well: the exhausting attempt to fit in. You know, when you are at a typical neighborhood gathering in the suburbs, or at those famous Thanksgiving dinners, and you catch yourself forcing a smile while listening to the same futile conversation about other people's lives, local gossip, or the superficial drama of someone who is always complaining but does absolutely nothing to change. It is at this exact moment that what we call leveling down happens. As the culture around us always pressures us to be sociable and pleasant, you end up masking who you really are. You keep to yourself your deepest reflections, your plans for financial independence, your business ideas, or that more critical view you have about life. You literally dim your own shine, hide your ability, and simplify your ideas just so you don't seem like the boring, intense, or arrogant one in the group. And doing this all the time drains of anyone. Often in the naivety of trying to belong, or just by being a humble person, you give yourself. You listen, support, and are always available to others. But you soon realize, as many have experienced and reported very harshly firsthand, that the friendship was a one-way street. You discover that the only true friend there was yourself. Behind your back, those same people you tried to welcome judge you, take advantage of your goodwill, and still criticize your reserved way. It is no wonder that, after going through this, the most logical decision is simply to close the door, put on your sunglasses, enjoy your own company, and cut ties at the root. You come to the conclusion that preferring isolation over having to wear a mask to please empty people, in fact, your greatest act of liberation. Your self-confidence becomes so solid that you no longer care if they will call you arrogant or problematic. But what if I told you that there is a middle ground? What if you didn't have to choose between being completely isolated or having to endure shallow relationships? The time has come to discover where the minds that work exactly like yours are. The great mistake we make when we finally decide to seek real connections is looking for deep water in mud puddles. Think about it. If you go to the same places as always, the generic company happy hour, the crowded little bar on Friday night, that neighborhood barbecue where the main topic is the neighbor's new pickup truck or the gossip of the week, you will only find the same type of person. Brilliant, analytical minds that value the truth no longer frequent these places. They, just like you, got tired of the social theater, realized the hypocrisy, and went back home. So, if you want to find people at your level, you need to drastically change your search territory. People with a high level of self-awareness gather around purposes, not distractions. Here in the United States, there is a very strong culture of specific and niche communities, and that is exactly where the rare minds hide. They are in environments focused on growth. We are talking about business masterminds, seminars on investments or real estate, book clubs focused on philosophy or personal development, and workshops for complex hobbies, whether restoring classic cars, technology, or even deep theological study groups, where people actually read and debate, instead of just repeating empty dogmas and hypocrisy, like so many fake Christians we see out there. Beyond the physical world, there is the digital environment. And no, I am not talking about scrolling through the Instagram feed to see the perfect and fake lives of others. I am talking about specialized forums, closed communities, and groups where highly capable people anonymously discuss artificial intelligence, self-sufficiency, stoicism, and financial independence. In these habitats, the rule is not appearance, but the value of what you have to say. That is where the people are who, just like, decided to focus on their work, their home, their health, and their peace of mind. The big turning point here is to stop socializing just for the sake of socializing. You do not go to these new environments with a looking for friends sign. You go to learn, to grow, to evolve. True friendship, the kind that does not require masks, will be a natural byproduct of finding someone who is on the same path as you. And believe it, having just one or two strategic allies who understand your silence and respect your limits is worth infinitely more than a schedule full of empty contacts. But let's say you did your homework. You entered one of these high-level environments, whether in person or online. How do you break the ice without falling into those shallow and unbearable conversations about the weather or what the person does for a living? There is a simple and surgical technique to test someone's depth right in the first few minutes of interaction. When you enter one of these new environments, your approach cannot be that of someone looking for external validation. You have already shielded yourself against hypocrisy, refused to fake smiles, and are very fine with your own company, so there is no desperation. You are going to apply what we can call the quick filter method. The idea here is to spend the least amount of energy possible testing the intellectual depth of the person in front of you, before deciding if they deserve another second of your time and your peace of mind. The first step of this method is to master the art of active and analytical listening. Remember your emotional radar that picks up lies and manipulations from afar. You are going to turn it on to maximum volume, but this time with a strategic purpose. When someone starts talking, do not interrupt. Let the person expose themselves. Just by observing body language, tone of voice, and initial subjects, you can already tell if you are dealing with someone authentic who talks about ideas and learnings, or if it is just another vain person talking about the things they bought, the cars they have, or the drama of the neighbor who didn't greet them at Walmart. If the person passed the first test, if did not force fake intimacy right away and did not spend 10 minutes talking only about themselves and appearances, you enter with the second stage of the filter, the open rupture question. Instead of asking banal things like "What do you do for a living?" or "Where do you live?" you ask a question that requires logical and deep reasoning, breaking the automatic social script. Ask things like, "What have you been reading lately that changed your perspective?" Or, "What was the biggest challenge in your business in the last few months?" Or even, "Do you think artificial intelligence will end up replacing skills or just automating processes?" The magic happens in the response. If the person chokes, gives a short answer, and changes the subject to something superficial, their filter has closed. You smile, nod, and politely end the conversation. Your energy. But if the person's eyes shine, if they stop to think for a second and give you back a structured reflection, a thesis, or a deep personal experience, your connection filter has beeped. Bingo! You've found someone at your level. The secret is not trying to be the most charismatic or pleasant guy in the room. The secret is to be the most selective. Highly intelligent people do not make friends. They recognize their equals through very subtle codes. And from this initial recognition, when you finally find someone who is also focused on their own health, independence, and not tolerating falseness, you do not need to be clingy or demanding attention, because then we enter the beauty of this specific type of relationship. You are not looking for a gossip companion. You are forming a kind of inner circle, an intellectual support network of extremely high value, where the exchange of information is what matters most, not the amount of casual weekend encounters. When you finally filter the crowd and find that person who speaks your language, who doesn't need masks, and who values silence as much as you do, the dynamic of the relationship changes completely. You are no longer in the exhausting game of having to send good morning messages every day or feeling obliged to attend every social event just to make an appearance. Highly intelligent people do not seek friends to fill schedules. They build what we can call a true personal board of directors. Think of large companies. The board of directors does not meet every day to have coffee and make small talk. They meet sporadically, with clear purposes, to discuss strategies, solve complex problems, and boost growth. That is exactly how friendship works between brilliant minds. You can go weeks or even months without talking to this person, focused on your home, your health, your job, or your business. But when you finally make a call, the conversation picks up exactly where it left off, with the same depth and without any emotional demands like, "Wow, you disappeared." These rare connections are based on mutual value exchanges and absolute respect for each other's time and space. You share articles, discuss books, debate investments, or simply exchange ideas on how to shield your mind against the hypocrisy of the current world. It is a relationship where there is no room for gossip, victimhood, or disguised envy. You celebrate each other's victories in silence and help each other see the blind spots that you couldn't see alone. And having only 2 or 3 such people in your inner circle is infinitely more powerful and transformative than being the most popular person in the neighborhood. You do not need a crowd to validate who you are. The strength of an analytical and independent mind is not in the number of contacts on the cell phone, but in the non-negotiable quality of who is allowed to enter your life and access your energy. When you understand and apply this filter, you stop being a hostage to loneliness and become the architect of your own ecosystem. And this is where the game of life turns in your favor. You realize that the power of the closed circle is your greatest fortress. Accepting that you were not born to please the masses is not a flaw, it is your greatest virtue. If you have made it this far learning to love your own company and focusing on your financial and mental independence, understand that your selectivity is a trophy, not a burden. Having few allies, but who are exactly at the same level as you, accelerates your success, protects your mental health, and shields you against an increasingly shallow world, where masks are abundant and truth is lacking. So, stop blaming yourself for not having dozens of friends and focus on what is real and non-negotiable for you. And if you identified with all this, I really want to hear your story. Leave it here in the comments. Today, do you prefer to go solo, shielding your peace? Or have you already found your small tribe of rare minds? Don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel so we can continue these deep reflections, and share this video with that one person who you know will perfectly understand this message. A big hug, keep your filter always on, and see you next time.